All right, we got another pop here in earnings with Cadence Design Systems ripping after sitting near the lows following a little bit of a drop around some of the other chip providers. George Tsilis joins us as Cadence Design does fit into the tech category, of course. Integrated circuits and decent amount of IP, a little bit of analog kind of bias to some extent, but also one here that fits into generally the whole semiconductor supply chain, George. So how important is this company, GT, or is it truly overlooked? Because we are in the overlooked category.
Yeah, it is a little overlooked. Synopsys is another company that is in the same industry space. In fact, Cadence and Synopsys are a couple of the larger global players in the electronic design, software, and semiconductor systems business. They essentially help bridge the gap between hardware, semiconductors, both digital and analog mixed signal semiconductors, as well as software. So here's the thing. I mean, if you look at this stock since around June, it really is in line with both Synopsys, but also the semiconductor equipment manufacturers, companies like Applied Materials, and they've actually been weak or quite a bit to the downside in the past 5 months or so. So less, I suggest, NVIDIA exposure, more exposure to traditional semiconductor systems, which if you look at the SMH as a proxy for the group, it's diverging away from NVIDIA. So it's more of that narrowing that I've talked about over the last week or so, with NVIDIA still leading the pack. But nonetheless, a really good report. They actually produced $1.44 in earnings. The estimate, the estimate was $1.44. Forgive me there. The earnings came in at $1.64, so they actually beat it by close to 14%. And then if you look at sales, they were higher by 19% at $1.22 billion versus $1.18 billion, and they also gave guidance which was slightly higher for the full year fiscal 2024. So they just reported Q3, and then of course for EPS they reported $5.90 at the midpoint. Previous estimates at $5.89, so a penny better. If you look at the sales print, it looks like $4.63 midpoint billion versus $4.628, so just slightly higher for sales and then slightly higher for earnings for the full year.
Okay. Looks pretty decent, especially after it seemed like the market lost some hope for earnings as well, which was when the market kind of sussed out some of the more sluggish semiconductor trades.
Yeah, that's the thing. At ASML, you have to put that company alongside this group of stocks, including Applied Materials, Synopsys. They've been trending to the downside. If you look at Cadence, I say Synopsys because it's Cadence's main competitor. But if you look at the chart in 6 months, it's down 11%. If you look year to date, it's down 7%. And so everyone's talking about semiconductors focused mostly on NVIDIA. But again, these stocks are not performing well, at least on a year to date basis. So again, they typically lead the semiconductor cycle. I still think there's room for potentially NVIDIA to continue at least into Q1 and Q2 of next year. But I think this is an important group to use as a barometer for perhaps some overarching oversupply, maybe some weakness in the entire group. I'm not saying it's the only barometer, but again, keep in mind that these stocks typically lead the semiconductor producers or manufacturers, companies like TSM and NVIDIA, which we know are still doing well. Now, if you look at prior to today's release and look at valuation, it's right in line with its 5-year average, trading around 37 times next year's earnings. Historically, it's around 39 times. So based on next year's earnings, it looks fractionally cheap in that regard.
All right, good stuff. Thanks, George. Like the value plays this afternoon, Cadence and F5, similar in that regard. Appreciate it, GT.